his only creatures. And really, the only way he wins is with Nathalia Johnyard. He has one copy of Elixir of Immortality in his deck, and he's basically have the strategy of, I don't care about producing a threat. It's about you stopping all of your threats and just winning by decking it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how he can navigate this matchup because, Brad's deck has a lot of very good threats against Wrath of Gods. He has Voice of Resurgence, he has Lingering Souls, he has Doom Travelers. But at the same time, Chimhoi does have 3 copies of Terminus. Terminus is very good against Brad's particular build of Aristocrats.
So Brad with Junk Aristocrats is going to start off with a Voice of Resurgence. Going over his deck list again, if you're familiar with Nelson at all, and he did win the Star City Games Open in Baltimore a couple weeks ago, he is playing a very similar list, but he does have 1 Obzat main deck. He does have 3 main deck Garruk Relentless as well. A couple of changes here and there. He does have a deck tech that we did with him a little bit earlier too, so if you have not checked that out, be sure to do it. You can find his exact 75 in there. He's got some Smites hanging out, Deathrite Shamans in his sideboard as well, so I'm pretty interested to see him play against Chihoi Yim, a player from Alabama type area. Again, he has a Star City Games Invitational topic. He has multiple Star City Games Open wins, and he's been playing this deck on Magic Online a lot. If you follow the Magic Online What's Happening page, you're going to see his name in the daily event 4-0s a lot. You see him cast a Supreme Verdict to take care of the front half of that Voice of Resurgence and Skursak High Priest, and he's pretty much the only person that's actually playing this deck.
Yeah, and you can see here just how difficult of a matchup it's going to be for Chi, because Brad basically forced Chi to cast a Supreme Verdict, and Brad just said, okay, my Voice of Resurgence dies, I get an Elemental token, and now my turn, I'm just going to cast the Lingering Souls and attack you for 3. So Brad's able to recover from a Supreme Verdict pretty easily. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Chi can actually do anything. It seems like his deck, I wouldn't say it's the worst matchup for his deck, but it's a pretty bad matchup just because of the kind of threats that Brad has.
Yeah, and Brad's ability to pace the game where, he doesn't have to put a lot of threats into play at once. He doesn't have to extend like maybe a mono red deck would have. He can pace the game in such a way where, look at this board right now, he doesn't have to put anything else on the table.
And the other thing is that Chi doesn't have cards like Restoration Angel in his deck or Thragtusk. So the thing about it is he can't even have a blocker in play that forces Brad to overcommit.
Yeah.
So, cards like Thragtusk, Restoration Angel are great in Bant control decks because they kind of force the opponent to overcommit, and then you can Wrath.
Yep.
The problem with Chihoi's deck is he just can't do anything. He can't commit anything to the board. He can't force Brad to commit anything more beyond maybe flashing back a Lingering Souls, which Brad's fine with doing. And, now he's forced to kind of 1-for-1 on Brad, which is pretty bad.
This is awesome.
Very tricky play from Brad Nelson here.
So this is awesome. Brad plays a Lingering Souls pre-combat to make the Elemental token into a 5/5. Chihoi is going to cast the Exile mode on Selesnya Charm, targeting the 5 Elemental token. You see Nelson is going to cast a Tragic Slip on his own token to make it a 4/4 and get damage in, negating that Selesnya Charm. Chihoi ends up just casting Snapcaster Mage on a Supreme Verdict and clearing the board, but I'm with you in basically everything that you said. Look at Brad just refuel.
Yeah, and the thing about Chihoi's deck is he's really under a lot of pressure. Uh-oh, wow. So probably wanted to just cast it for 1, but a little too quick with the Miracle there. But the problem with Chihoi's deck is that he really needs Sphinx of Revelation in this particular, obviously he always wants Sphinx of Revelation, but in this particular matchup, because of the amount of times he's forced to Wrath, Brad's deck is forcing to Wrath, he really needs to refill. So he needs those Urban Evolutions in his decks, and he needs the Sphinx of Revolutions. He needs to keep chaining Wrath effects.
Now you see Nelson slam down a 5th land and Obsidian Ghost Council, his 1-of in his deck. He's going to come in, let it deal the damage, blink it out. Chihoi going to play an... that is an insane draw.
Very good.
Chihoi.
Very good with the Supreme Verdict that's in his hand right here. We say Wrath effects aren't good at dealing with Obsidian, but when you can cast them at instant speed, they're pretty good.
That is an insane draw from him. Able to flash in Supreme Verdict to clear away the Obsidian. I mean, Chihoi is sitting at 3, and Nelson again is just pacing the game. Again, just committing some small threats to the table. Yim is going to draw a card. What is this card? That's not going to help him. As he draws a Dissipate, it's going to concede the game. So, Brad Nelson is going to win game number 1. As you see a little friendly banter between the two. And look at that cute phone case for Brad. It looks a little pink. That is a delight.
And, that's the problem with this matchup is that Brad just the way that his deck is set up, he forces Chihoy to constantly cast these Wrath effects over and over and over again. And the only way that his deck can keep up with that is by drawing cards as well.
Yep.
So if he's able to draw into this Sphinx of Revelation and his Urban Evolutions to keep up with the pace that Brad's putting on him, then maybe he has a chance. But in that game, you just saw, he drew a lot of Wrath effects, but he didn't draw anything to refill his hand.
Yeah.
So Brad was able to navigate it pretty easily.
So we're going to take a look at the sideboards here. We're going to start with Chihoy's as he's sideboarding pretty quickly, as is Nelson, and see what he can do to turn things around against Junk Aristocrats.
So yeah, Chihoy's got some cards in his sideboard that aren't that bad. He's got an extra copy of Terminus, which is obviously probably the Wrath effects he wants most in this matchup. He also has 2 copies of Planar Cleansing. Again, I think you just need as many Wrath effects as you want. The 1-for-1 removals is not really going to work in this matchup. So I like bringing in Planar Cleansing also because it's a potential way to deal with Planeswalkers. Again, the problem with control decks like this, where you don't have any creatures, is you can't attack Planeswalkers. So you don't really have a good way to go after cards like Sorin or Garruk. So I think you probably want to bring in those Planar Cleansings as well. He also has 1 copy of Aetherling, which, again, I think you want that card as well, just because it's a way to put pressure on Brad, and it's an alternate win condition that doesn't require you to sort of give Brad more and more time to just kind of draw out of it. So I like bringing in the Terminus, the Planar Cleansings, and the Aetherlings. Beyond that, he's got a Psychic Spiral, 2 Plasm Captures, a Renounce the Guild, 2 copies of Dispel, 2 Negates, and 3 Fogs. I don't really think you need any of these cards in this matchup. Fog is pretty good against aggressive decks, but Brad's deck isn't about doing a lot of damage in one turn, something like a Naya Blitz deck or a red-green deck. He's basically about just overwhelming you with these cheap, efficient creatures that are kind of obnoxious to deal with.
They're super resilient creatures.
Yeah, they're just resilient, but he's not gonna be attacking you for like 8 or 10 points of damage a turn. So I kind of like keeping those cards in the sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, he's got that 1 Renounce the Guilds in his sideboard too. I mean, do you want to board in 1 Renounce to take care of 1 Obsidian? You know, is kind of a question you have to ask. I mean, yeah, it can take care of it. It is a makeshift way to take care of Voice of Resurgence, sure. It's also this wonky way to be able to take care of a Varos, a Scar Stripe. Actually does like a decent job of that, but it is a one-off, and I think there's some situations where it can actually be like good or it can be bad. It seems like kind of a high variance card.
Yeah, it's pretty high variance. I think if he was playing against a deck where he thought there was going to be a little, I think it's better against a deck like with Obsidian and Falconite Aristocrat, like the old Aristocrats Act 2 deck. I could see maybe boarding in the Renounce the Guild. Obviously, Dissipate's not very good in this matchup. He has 2 copies of his main deck. Maybe he wants to board out. Main deck, he only basically has 2 copies of Selesnya Charm to deal with the Obsidian. He also has, you know, obviously the Alchemist Refuge, 2 copies, which we saw, which is another way that for him to deal with it. So maybe bringing 1 Renounce the Guild, but there's not that many cards he wants to cut. Like, he can't cut any of the card draw. He just can't afford it.
He can't afford to do that at all.
Augur Bolus maybe might come out. It's not that great in this matchup. So maybe shedding some of the Augur Bolus numbers to fit in that extra Renounce the Guild. But really, I think he wants the Terminus, the Planar Cleansing, and the Aether. Those 4 cards.
So we see we're off to a start here that does not involve a Farseek here from Yim. Nelson just on the Buddy Land draw, so he's not going to be able to put anything to play. Here's Augur Bolas to start, so let's see what Yim can find off of this look at 3, and it's going to be a Supreme Verdict, a card that's, again, not great against Nelson's deck, but good enough that he actually has to leave it in.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Brad's hand is, you know, it's not as fast of a start as you expect from his deck with the amount of cheap creatures he has, but he has 3 copies of Voice of Resurgence.
Yeah.
So, pretty devastating if he can get those in play, because any Wrath effect, basically, short of a Terminus, isn't that effective.
Yeah,
but she does actually have the Terminus, and he even has an Augur Bolus to slow down the Voice of Resurgence, which means that Brad's going to be forced to play something else into the board.
And the last land that Nelson wants to draw there is probably Gavany Township, but that is the land that has been given to him. You see his hand, as you mentioned, a couple copies of Voice of Resurgence, has Lingering Souls, has Obsidian in his hand, has kind of an awkward Abrupt Decay, where you're maybe sideboarding then and thinking that Chihoy has maybe some sort of Detention Sphere type effect. The things that he can Abrupt Decay are Augur of Bolas and Snapcaster Mage. And then it doesn't even look like, nothing after sideboard either. So nothing great to actually be able to do with that Abrupt Decay. Maybe Nelson, if we do go to a 3rd game, realizes that and sideboards it out.
Maybe he was afraid of Rest in Peace.
Yeah, also very
obviously
real thing.
A very, very impressive card against Junk Aristocrats. Band control, it's definitely in their wheelhouse to possibly have that type of card. But again, he saw Snapcaster Mage, so it's kind of reasonable to assume that your opponent's probably not going to have Rest in Peace if they have Snapcaster Mage in deck. So maybe he's afraid of the Tension Sphere possibly. But again, the Tension Sphere is usually going to go after Lingering Souls tokens. So at that point, the Abrupt Decay is kind of worthless.
Yeah.
But you know, it'd be interesting to find out why Brad decided to bring that card in.
Appetite for Brains is a huge draw step there for Nelson. One of the cards that he's probably the most scared of is Terminus, and Appetite for Brains can take care of that. See attacks, spirit tokens, all that good stuff. Gonna get in with the Voice of Resurgence. Chihoy gonna keep him honest. Just block with that. Play a Varls and pass.
Brad does not protect himself against Terminus here, so now Terminus will be able to devastate Brad's board. It won't trigger the Voice of Resurgence, and he can't regenerate the Varl. So he could have played a turn where he could have possibly just protected his card against. So it looks like he just wanted to sacrifice his Voice of Resurgence to get into the graveyard.
Yeah, I mean, put it in the graveyard for whatever reason. Also, I mean, if you kind of want to look at just positives, just good practice.
Yeah.
You know, just in case for moving forward. You see Chihoy's hand right now. He does have a Snapcaster Mage. He also has a Supreme Verdict that he did find off of the old Augur Bolas to go along with a couple other cards. I think there's a Revelation hiding out in there as well, and a Dissipate. So his hand is pretty good right now. And as you mentioned, the big thing in this matchup for him is he needs to be able to go, you know, match removal effect, draw a bunch of cards, another match removal effect, and just keep doing that until he wins.
Yeah. And it's interesting that the turn before, Brad could have actually cast Appetite and Doom Traveler and protected himself against Terminus, but now he can get rid of the Supreme Verdict in Chihoy's hand, but now he just doesn't have any pressure on the board. And Chihoy has a Snapcaster along with a Supreme Sphinx's Revelation and a Dissipate.
Yeah. So a main phase Revelation right now, it's going to be for 5. So Chihoy's going to refill, has 2 cards in his hand in the form of Dissipate and Snapcaster Mage. 5 more coming, going to put him to 7 on the end step. He draws a Glacial Fortress ×2, Revelation ×2, and a Hinterland Harbor. So not the best Revelation, but certainly not a bad one.
It was a pretty lucky draw on Brad's part. Brad did not draw a 5th land, so Chihoy actually dodged Obsidian coming down because Chihoy's Sphinx Revelation was so bad there. He didn't really have to draw an answer to Obsidian. Yeah. So if Brad drew a 5th land and slammed down Obsidian, he might have been able to just win with that card alone. So yeah, Chihoy just draws another Dissipate. His card's really weak to Obsidian right now. It looks like he just mistakenly played a Dissipate instead of a Sphinx Revelation.
Yeah, so let's try this again. Okay, so what he's going to do is he's going to Snapcaster Mage the Terminus and put everything onto the bottom. Again, you're seeing right now, as he plays a Glacial Fortress to pass the turn back, how huge Terminus is in this matchup.
Yeah.
It is gigantic in this matchup.
And Brad whiffed on a land again, so that Obsidian, again, it would be huge if he can get it to resolve, but it just couldn't come into play on the right turn. So Dissipate is still live for Chihoy, and he could just basically pass the game down, play Sphinx Revelation every turn.
The big thing, too, don't forget, is that it does have to be another black source, too, so it can't just be any land. You know, it does have to be another black source for Obsidian. But
I think it's a reason. Yeah, given the amount of black sources in Brad's deck, I think it's fair to say that he can draw either Isolate Chapel, Overgrown Tomb, another Woodland Cemetery. But yeah, obviously it has to be a black source too. But Chihoy in pretty good position now. Looks like he drew an Alchemist Refuge too. So there's his answer to a potential Obsidian as well.
And now's a good time to cash in one of those Supreme Verdicts. Now he just wants to kind of get some of the cards out of his hand. You see him play Refuge. He's going to play Elixir of Immortality. And this is exactly what his deck wants to do every single game. Like, you know, you saw him Revelate for 7 on Nelson's end step, but he's perfectly fine figuring out what 7 cards he wants to keep, sculpting a perfect hand, and then just discarding some garbage, which you see him discard a couple of lands here, and just kick it back to Nelson, and daring Nelson to try to keep up here. And Nelson just has another Voice of Resurgence, and it's like, Chihoy basically, do I even care about that? Is that worth dissipating? So here's an Appetite for Brains after he does let the Voice of Resurgence resolve.
Yeah, and he could basically, I like dissipating there because you really want to just hold on to that Terminus.
He dissipates there to give Nelson elemental token. So I like Nelson sequencing there a lot, but at the end of the day, it's not a big deal for Chihoy to just say, all right, that's fine. You get an elemental token. It's a 2/2 to go along with their Voice of Resurgence, and I have a Terminus to clear things up again, and another Revelation to refuel. Yep.
And this is exactly where Chihoy's deck really just keeps rolling. You see how important those card drawing spell is. He needs to be in a position where he can cast those card drawing spells and not be under enough pressure where he can still play other things. Yeah. So he's drawing all his Wrath effects. He's drawing the right Wrath effects. And there was one turn where Brad might have been able to slow things down with Appetite for Brains and Doom Traveler and get rid of the Terminus, but maybe a slight mistake on Brad's part. But either way, we're at a point in the game now where there's not many cards that Chihoy has to worry about.
Yeah. And now you see it dissipate. It gives Nelson another elemental token, which Chihoy is perfectly fine with because he doesn't want a Planeswalker on the board because his deck is pretty weak to those. Then he flashes in a Terminus via Alchemist's Refuge, clears up the board yet again, and now he's going to cast Urban Evolution. He's going to draw 3 and be able to play another land for the turn.
And this is where Chihoy's deck is almost unbeatable when his opponent just has no threats on board and he's able to keep going, getting his card drawing spells. It's like he's already got the elixir in play to kind of reload on all his card draw and wrath effects. So interesting to see whether or not Brad can sort of pull something together here. He still has a Snapcaster and Mage in his hand to rebuy another Sphinx of Revelation. Looks like he's going to let the Obzedat resolve. Doesn't care too much about it. He still, now that he has the Alchemist Refuge and he can cast instant speed wrath effects, he has plenty of answers to Obzedat.
Yeah, Alchemist's Refuge is, man, and he draws another one here too, so now he can do this at will. But you see 2 of them. Alchemist's Refuge was a card that Kunio had in his deck.
Yep.
And you saw Reduke have a lot of success with this card, along with Nephalia Drownyard. This deck is very similar to that one. Refuge is a super interesting card where, you know, again, all of these lands from that set have this opportunity cost because they tap for a colorless. They're always in these 3 or 4 color decks. But you see the power of this card where a normal Bant deck having to play against Obzedat is just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And one land, not even a spell, a land makes it pretty irrelevant all of a sudden. And you see Chihoy's going to activate Refuge and verdict away this stuff. And I'll pick up my my Augur Bolus. That's got to go to the graveyard too. But the one thing that we've talked about a lot over the course of this weekend is that what is the Sphinx's Revelation deck? Where is it? What is it? Blue, white, red? Is it Esper? What kind of deck is it supposed to be? It feels like it's supposed to be this one.
Well, I mean, again, it looks very good in this situation. Obviously, Brad got a pretty awkward start, and Chihoy got pretty much the ideal start on his side. So his deck looks fantastic right here, and clearly you can tell that he's been playing this deck a lot because he knows exactly what he's supposed to be doing every turn.
He's been playing this deck on Magic Online crazy.
And the other thing that's very important about a deck like this is you have to play it quickly.
Yes.
Because if you stumble, if you make too many, think about it too much every turn, you're going to draw a lot because this deck doesn't put any pressure on their opponents.
No.
They try to win by decking. So Chihoy definitely is playing very quickly. He's playing at a quick pace. Even though he's winning, he still knows that I have to try to just make sure I play every turn quickly, don't mess around. He figures out what 7 cards he needs. He discards the rest. So I think he's trying to close the game out as quickly as he can. But again, his deck isn't built to close games out quickly. His deck is built to sort of just like draw the game out. And I think he might have played 2 lands this turn. Did he play Urban Evolution? Yeah. So picks up a Sunpetal Grove, and he still has that Obzedat in play, but doesn't have to worry about that because there's just so many cards that he can draw now.
Yeah.
There's a Terminus, there's a pure. Oh, so it looks like he did bring in the
He did the board in the Rounds to the Guild, and I'm perfectly fine with that just because it is a very clean answer to take care of Obzedat, assuming that things go according to plan. Of just like Wrather guys, and then Brad's big answer is all right, fine, take that. I've got Obzedat. He's like, all right, 2-man answer. Are you done? Like big revelation, whatever.
And it's got to be a good feeling when you have 14 cards in your hand and you're like, all right, I'll just find the best 7 and discard the rest.
Happily discard, yeah.
So Brad basically trying to do as much as he can in this matchup. Obzedat, again, not very impressive when your opponent has Alchemist Refuge, and you saw him take a Renounce the Guild off of Augur Bolus. So Sin Collector comes down. Another good card in this matchup, but
It's
too
a
late.
really good card in this matchup, actually.
So there goes Renounce the Guild in response to Sin Collector. Sin Collector is going to resolve.
Take a look.
So many good cards for Brad to choose from.
You see 2 copies of Selesnya Charm, a Sphinx's Revelation, Urban Evolution, a Supreme Verdict, and a Snapcaster Mage. Now again, Sin Collector is actually going to exile a card, not put it in the graveyard, which is relevant here.
Yeah.
Especially when Chihoy's plan is to recycle his deck via Elixir of Immortality. But one thing that you mentioned is the pace of play that you have to have when you play this deck. You need to know what you want to do in every phase of the game. You don't have time to think a lot about your decision-making process because, as you said, time is definitely a factor. And I 100% agree with you. You can see that Chihoy's pace of play is very, very quick. But the interesting thing about his deck is that the opponent is not incentivized to concede at all.
No.
You know, at no point are they going to be incentivized to concede. Now, you see Nelson kind of concede the game, which I'm a little bit surprised about, you know, because with time being such a factor here, I would make my opponent kill me.
Yeah.
Because it takes them so long to do it. And you can use the clock as your ally.
The problem with the situation is that Chiho is playing the deck so quickly. He even had the 4 lands and the 3 lands in the drown yard on the top of his land pile, just ready to go at the end of Brad's turn
Sure.
each time. So he's like, mill 3, mill 3, mill 3. Brad can tell that Chihoy knows how to play this deck quickly. He's not going to drag things out. So Brad figures, all right, well, this game's probably going to end in 10 minutes anyway.
Yep.
I might as well just go to game 3 because I don't think if I wanted to drag it out for the draw, I can do that in game 3.
Sure.
But rather, maybe I'll just go to game 3. Why bother wasting time? You never know what's going to happen.
There is also the aspect too of the information game where Chihoy's plan of killing you is by milling you. Milling you is gaining information about how you're sideboarding, and maybe there's something in Nelson's sideboard, as we did not have the opportunity to go over that he wants to hide. And in Nelson's sideboard, he has 3 copies of Abrupt Decay, 2 Duresses, 1 Sin Collector, 4 Deathrite Shaman, an additional Obsidian to go along with the one in his main deck, 2 Appetite for Brains, and 2 copies of Smite. Now, I feel like the cards that he did bring in, Chihoy had seen. So, he saw Appetite for Brains. He knows that Obsidian's there from game 1. Not sure if Nelson's sideboard in Deathrite Shaman, but I wouldn't be surprised because it looks like Chihoy's, his plan is pretty predicated on Snapcaster Mage.
I have to say, I'm not sure if Brad did this for this reason, but it's conceivable that he boarded in the Abrupt Decays to deal with the Elixir of Immortality. Because the way Chihoy played that game, he had the Elixir out there. There were turns where he just tapped out to cast a large Sphinx of Revelation. So if Brad can get lucky and Chihoy doesn't play correctly and is able to get rid of the Elixir and deal with the Elixir Immortality, there's a chance that Brad might be able to win the game that way.
Yeah.
It's a long shot, but again, I'm wondering why he decided to bring in. If you just think it's for Rest in Peace, in all likelihood, it's probably for Rest in Peace.
Yeah.
But there is an off chance that maybe if you deal with the Elixir Immortality, and Chihoy only has 1 copy in the Thalia's Drown Yard, so like depending on the sequencing or depending on where it is in his deck, there is a chance that Brad could just deck Chihoy.
Yep.
But I'll be interested to ask Brad why he decided to board in the Abrupt Decay. And my guess is it's probably for cards like the Tension Sphere or Rest in Peace, because Rest in Peace is so good. But knowing your opponent has Rest in Peace and a Snapcaster Mage, you probably have to figure they don't have Rest in Peace in their deck. But we'll see.
Now, this is a really good start here for Nelson. Starts with a Young Wolf into a Voice of Resurgence. No messing around here, and Chihoy is going to miss with Augur of Wallace. So if you're Nelson, you are absolutely thrilled right now with how this game is going.
Yeah, that's a perfect base against a Supreme Verdict.
Yep. So you see the Augur step in front of the Voice of Resurgence. Young Wolf's going to get some damage in, and now here's a Lingering Souls. So Chihoy, most importantly, no turn to Farseek. Doesn't find anything with his Augur of Wallace, so he's got a bit of an uphill climb here. And you see Supreme Verdict. How good is it going to be right now? Right now, it's going to leave 2 guys behind.
Oh, and here's it looks like there's an Appetite for Brains drawn for Brad Nelson.
Gonna take a little look. Appetite for Brains shows you 2 verdicts. Okay, so if you're a Chihoy fan, you're pretty happy that he has double verdict in his hand to go along with Terminus. You see Brad taking down the information, also double Island and a Sun Petal Grove over there. But one huge thing here for Nelson this turn is he did not hit his 4th land. I think he would have loved to slam down Garruk this turn, fight that Augur of Wallace, and get the beatdowns going still. Yeah. Makes the Wrath even worse.
Garruk is, again, just being a Planeswalker is very good against control decks because they don't have a lot of ways to deal with Planeswalkers. So Brad takes out the Supreme Verdict, and it looks like he's just going to attack here. I don't, knowing that Chihoy has a Supreme Verdict in his hand, I don't think he can really afford to commit anything else to the board here.
You see him fidgeting with the Young Wolf. Do you like sending in Young Wolf this turn?
I didn't like sending it in last turn because I thought Chihoy was going to block it.
Me too.
Yeah, because why? If you have 2 Supreme Verdicts, you want to make sure it dies. So I'm surprised that he sent it in last turn. And then the fact that Chihoy didn't block it, I thought would give me even more reason to just send it in this turn, unless you thought Chihoy maybe learned his lesson this time. But
now this is interesting, because now Chihoy doesn't have to Wrath.
Yeah,
that's the big thing, right? Where he doesn't have a reason to Wrath now, but Nelson I think kind of enticed him to not Wrath because now Garruk comes down. Chihoy did not draw a counterspell. He fights that. This is going to flip into Garruk the Veil Curse. And now, Nelson's going to send with all 4 of his creatures, get in 5 points of damage, and pass the turn back. And now Chihoy is in some serious trouble.
Yeah, I guess you can say he incentivized him not to Wrath, but I still think you probably. I don't quite understand that last sequence. I don't think he did it to try to incentivize him not to Wrath. But either way, the Garruk was probably going to resolve next turn no matter what.
Yeah.
But let's see what Chihoy does here. He has the Terminus. He can cast Supreme Verdict and then rebuy into a Terminus the next turn. The problem is that he still has to deal with that Garruk. That Garruk's going to be churning out tokens. And again, his deck just doesn't have, it doesn't even have Detention Sphere afterboard.
Now, one card that he can try to get rid of that Garruk, oddly enough, is Renounce the Guilds, because Garruk, when it is flipped, is black and green. So that is something to keep in mind. It's a minor thing, but it is a relevant one, and I'm a little bit surprised yet again that we don't see Chihoe cast Supreme Verdict. Not terribly surprised, but he's gonna have to take his licks this turn. 2, 3, 4, 5 yet again. Go down to 6.
Well, yeah, because I think Brad wants to sacrifice a creature to get an Obsidian.
No, I think he's going for Sin Collector.
Ah, yes.
I think he wants Information, because he has gone by, he has gone by 2 Obsidots, and he is going to go for Sin Collector here and blow up Chihoe's plan of casting Terminus. You see he's going to select that, and now Chihoe is in a dangerous spot, because now he has to cast Wrath.
Now
he doesn't have a choice.
He basically has to top deck a Terminus here.
Yeah.
To have a really good shot.
Draw a card,
like
another
it's just
land.
a
He's drawing a
hollow
land every turn this game, it looks like. I'm not even kidding. And his Augur Bolas missed.
Yeah. So Chihoe can cast Supreme Verdict here. Brad will be left with the Young Wolf and a Elemental token. It will be a 2/2. So he can attack Chihoe for 4, dropping Chihoe to 2, and he'll still have that Garruk in play. That's
No,
gonna
but
be
he'll flashback Lingering Souls to add 2 more power to the table,
yeah.
and he can finish off and actually make a Wolf token with the Garruk as well to make that Elemental even larger. Chihoe realizes it. Nelson's not going to miss it. Former Player of the Year, and he wins the match to move on to 8-0. Brad Nelson defeats Chihoe Yim 2-1. Junk Aristocrats defeats Bant Control.